Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1771 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Toronto's Waterfront BIA. Get to the Waterfall Festival this coming weekend on the waterfront. Blue Sky Agency, the official distributor of Silen's quiet, comfortable, and customizable office pods. Create sanctuary within your workspace. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making his Toronto Mic debut, it's Fred Mollin. Welcome, Fred.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
I want to shout out, we have a mutual friend, and his name is Gary Chowan. How do you know Gary?
I know Gary through, just Toronto friends way back when, and I had used a number of different hair cutters for years. Sure. Frankly, as I started to lose my hair, and still am, years ago, I really realized I needed a surgeon. And Gary was pretty well the best one I had ever seen. And he still is, in my opinion, the greatest hair cutter I've ever had. Absolutely.
Well, that's high praise for Gary. He's worthy of that high praise. You know, the man styled Cher's hair.
Yes, he is a legend, Gary.
I also like symmetry, and I like the fact this is we're recording on a Tuesday. On Friday, we're having FOTM cast. That's where we discuss episodes from the previous quarter of Toronto Mic'd, and I find it interesting. The first episode of this quarter was a gentleman named Cliff Thorburn, and Cliff was a world-class, world champion snooker player, and he visited the basement here because Gary told him to. And you're the last episode, and you're here connecting remotely because Gary told you to.
Love it.
Where do we find you in the world today? Where are you?
I'm based out of Nashville, although I am a Canadian as well as an American. I lived in Toronto probably for a total of, boy, I'm going to say 27 years, 30 years almost. And so I've moved to Nashville. I moved in 2001, and I've been based out of Nashville since, but certainly still a Canadian very much at heart. So
I know you're born in Amityville, New York, but what brought you to Toronto in the first place?
Well, I had, my musical life started early, and I really wanted to have a life in music, and I quit school in Long Island, New York, when I was 16, because I just couldn't wait to get going, and I wanted to get a record deal. I thought I was the next James Taylor. Turned out I wasn't, but I did, in fact, I did win one victory, which was I never had to go to school again. That was really good. And then I, about a year and a half later, I was following my brother, who's 7 years older than me, who was really my best pal. And we had started to write songs together, and we had both started to become creative characters together. And he moved to Toronto to try underground theater in 71. And I went to visit him in 72, and I never left.
Okay, there's a song. I'm going to play a bit of a song and ask you for every detail you can remember. But right off the top, I want to let the listeners know you wrote a book, Unplugged. So just summarize the book, and then we're going to get into some cool stories. I'm so glad you're here, and I love your Toronto connection here. But Unplugged, stories and secrets from a life making records, scoring film, and working with the legends of music. What made you decide to write it all down?
Well, Mike, the truth is, about 5 years ago now, I just started to tell stories into my phone, dictate them into my phone, into my notes section, just so I wouldn't forget. There was so many stories about my life and music and all the great people and interesting projects I've worked on, that I had a lot of tales to tell, and I didn't want to forget them. So I started to dictate these stories, and when I had about 20, I would go back home, after I dictated them, and I'd finish them off on a laptop, but, mostly they were dictated. And when I had about 20, I said, I can probably write a book. And the truth was, that may have been a dumb decision because I was stuck then trying to write a book. But I am really proud that it got done. And it is very much about, it's really not about a tell-all about me as much as it is these behind-the-scenes stories of all these wonderful musical projects and musical people I've worked with.
Okay, now I will just let you know, I have a WhatsApp chat with some listeners, and I just asked this group for memories of one particular song. I'm going to play some of it, and then we're going to talk about it. We're going back to 1975 with this one. But the nostalgia tied to this song for people of a certain vintage from, the greater Toronto area. Do you mind if I just play some of it, and then you give me all the details you can remember about this particular song?
Sure.
All right, here, let's play.
'Twas the night before Christmas, and all round the beach not a creature was stirring, not even a leech. The stockings were hung by the boathouse with care, in the hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. For Daddy had taken us down to the shore to spend Christmas Eve with the family once more. And while Mother and Father lay snug in their bed, my girlfriend and I went down to the shed. We took off our clothes and peeled to the skin and jumped in the water for a midwinter swim. When out of the darkness she let out a hoot. I just saw a shark in a Santa Claus suit.
Santa Claus suit!
Then the silence was broken by a terrible din. Jingle bells ringing on a circling fin. We swam and we swam to get out of its reach, till we thought we were finally safe on the beach. When what to our wondrous eyes should appear but a jolly white shark who ate tiny reindeer. Oh, Dasher. Oh, Dancer. Oh, Donner and Blitzen. Oh, Comet, Cupid, Prancer, and Vixen.
Fred, I don't actually want to fade this down, but I do want to hear you tell me everything you can remember about Santa Jaws.
Wow. I was thinking, what in 75 did I do? Well, first of all, when I moved to Toronto with my brother and found a new life there and became a Canadian, and blissful, by the way, we had started Canadians, as Canadians, we started the first truly Canadian improvisational comedy group called Homemade Theater. And then we actually wound up having a TV series called Homemade Television for young children on CBC for 3 years. I think it was from 76 to 78. During the time that we did Homemade Theater, we got the attention of A&M Records of Canada, and we decided to make some novelty records. And the first one we did was a takeoff on the movie Jaws, because it had just become such a phenomenon. Sure. And so Larry, Phil, and myself wrote Santa Jaws, and then the backside, which is a bunch of songs about sharks, and done to the music of Christmas carols. It was really, it's one of my favorite moments, really, because first of all, those years doing Homemade Theater, while doing record production, I was doing a lot of other stuff. But the work I did with my brother and Phil Sabbath and Barry Flatman, we were brothers, and we just laughed ourselves through years. And doing Santa Jaws, I remember recording it. It was done at Manta Sound. I think Andy Hermant, I got to co-produce it with me, who was the owner of Manta. And, we did a lot of sound effects, like, when the shark is eating the reindeer, those are different vegetables and apples and stuff that we used. And, it was just a howl to do. And you know what? The great part was it actually went gold as a single in Canada. And we were, Mike, here's the great part. In the Juno Awards that year, we were up for Song of the Year. And it's not a song, it's a spoken thing, except at the end, I wrote a little song that was just, basically tags the actual record. And it's not really a song. I mean, it's like a jingle almost. And there we are at the Ryerson auditorium for the Junos. And we're all sitting there. And during the medley of the Song of the Year, they had to do ours. And they had these gigantic boxes like that the dancers would be dancing on to my song. And every box had a photo of one of us. So literally, like, my face was this gigantic box, Larry's face was gigantic, and the dancers are dancing on top of the boxes, singing Santa Jaws is Coming to Town, which was just the most surreal and hysterical moment. And of course, we didn't win. Yeah.
Who won? Do you remember?
No, I do not. We could look it up. It was probably whatever. It was a 75. Wow. I'm sure we can look it up.
Yeah, it's probably the 76 Junos, I would guess, if this thing, because Jaws.
I've tried to find it. See if CBC has it. I'd love to see that visual of us. It was pretty.
If anyone listening, because you never know who's listening. I have a feeling there's some people who have access to a CBC archive or something. So if you can get me a recording of this, and I'll share it with Fred, and we can go down nostalgia lane together. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, it could be the 75 or 76 Junos, yeah.
The fact that this novelty single, Santa Jaws, gets a gold record in this country, I think that's a heck of a start. You're still very young. And this whole chapter, Homemade Theater, I'm a titch young to remember this. I was probably in diapers when Santa Jaws came out. But as I was catching up, and I mentioned the nostalgia, people a bit older than me have the single, loved it. This was a hit.
It was a hit. It was a blast to hear it on the radio. It almost was a hit in the U.S., but A&M in the U.S. picked it up too late, so we just missed it. But it was a smash in Canada, and we heard it on the radio all the time.
One of the gentlemen I think he's got 9 years on me, and he had the single, and he loved it. He would hear it on 1150 CKOC in, is that Hamilton? Yeah, that's Hamilton.
Yeah.
Is a gentleman from Burlington named Rob Pruce. Rob gets lots of shout outs on this show. Rob Pruce wrote me not only to tell me he had Santa Jaws and loved it, but he says he was thinking about a song. I'm not going to name it because I'm going to play a bit of it and then we're going to dive in. But he says, I was thinking of this song, You Know What's Coming. And he goes, it is one of the best arranged pop ballads. Don't let the passage of 40 years since its release fool you into thinking it's just another 70s love song. The lyrics, the vocal, the orchestral arrangement, the piano, the rhythm section, everything, it's intense. I remember every note as if I heard it for the first time only yesterday. Now I'm going to play it. We're going to talk about it, but I need to tell you, Rob Pruce knows a thing or two about piano arrangements, etc. The man was the keyboardist for Spoons during their heyday, so that's like praise from Caesar. This is, and you probably thought I had the wrong year when I said I'm going to play you a song from 1975. You probably thought, oh, he's messing up. This came later than that. But let me just play some of this. A song sung by a fellow FOTM. FOTM means friend of Toronto Mike. Fred, you're now an FOTM. But let's hear this, and then we'll discuss.
You ask me if I love you, and I choke on my reply. I'd rather hurt you honestly than mislead you with a lie. And who am I to judge you on what you say or do? I'm only just beginning to see the real you. And sometimes when we touch, the honesty's too much, and I have to close my eyes and hide. I wanna hold you till I die, till we both break down and cry.
It's too much for me, Fred.
Hold you till the fear in me subsides.
Okay, my goodness gracious. Please, what is your involvement in this Dan Hill hit, Sometimes When We Touch?
Well, I produced it. We were kids. I mean, Matt McCauley and I were producing it. Dan was the writer. Barry Mann was also the writer. And, that was back in 77, and it became a hit. Amazingly, Mike, it became a hit at a time of the year that we weren't supposed to release anything except Christmas material. And we actually released it in spite of that rule, and it became a smash hit into 78. And it's chased me all my life. It's the most successful single I've ever produced. And certainly I'm very, very proud of it. We were just kids, very, very precocious kids, all of us, Dan, me, and Matt. And we knew we had a smash hit. We did. I think it was just up to us to bring it home.
So how did you meet Dan?
I had moved to Toronto, as I mentioned, to pursue my what I was hoping was going to be my life as a singer-songwriter, performer. And Dan was playing similar gigs in similar clubs in Toronto. And we just started hanging out together, and I wound up producing a demo for him. And again, I had no particular skill at producing, but I knew records very well. I was kind of a musicologist as well as a musician. And he just thought I'd be a great producer. And then he actually did a creative blind date with his old friend that he grew up with, Matt McCauley. And Matt and I became partners, and we produced records until Matt decided in 1981 that he no longer wanted to do that. But Matt and I are still the best of friends. He's my closest friend, and I still stay in touch with Dan as well. But that's how it started, was just really literally being friends with Dan as a fellow singer-songwriter, and then him asking me if I wanted to help him.
So we talked about Santa Jaws, right? Mm-hmm. Which was like a Canadian phenomenon. But that's a short period of time to go from Santa Jaws to this.
Yeah, I mean, by the time I was doing Santa Jaws, I had already produced 2 Dan Hill albums. And then, which both went gold, by the way, in Toronto, and not in Toronto, in Canada. And then the third album, Longer Fuse, was the one that had Sometimes When We Touch.
And now you're not, this is obviously not what I find is, because I'm born and raised in Toronto and I'm still here. Okay, what's wrong with me? You're in Nashville now, you were in New York, you're all over the place. But I always, growing up, I'd hear songs and I didn't know initially, like, is this a Canadian hit? Is this big in Canada? Or is this something, they're singing in Nashville or in Germany or something like that? So it's like, as the internet emerges and you start to dig in, you can kind of figure out, like, oh, this Spoons song I thought was an international hit was actually just big in Canada. And then you find out this Dan Hill. This is an international hit record. Dan Hill, Sometimes When We Touch.
Yeah, we had Canadian hits with Dan on the first 2 albums starting in 74. And but Sometimes When We Touch became an international #1 record for the most part.
Dan Hill's a sweetheart. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yes, he is.
And I'm just remembering how I got connected to Dan was through Blair Packham. Did you ever cross paths with Blair?
Yeah,
Packham?
I love Blair. We're Facebook pals these days, but he's a wonderful guy.
Okay, he's reuniting the Jitters. They're playing at Hughes Room, so.
Oh, that's great.
Fred, you got to fly in for the Jitters reunion here.
I would love to.
One fun fact I wanted to ask you about is, again, so that's 1977, when Sometimes When We Touch is a big hit, of course. We all know it. It's like our national anthem here. But I was curious if you could just share a little bit. I think it's interesting, and I asked Dan Hill about this, but let's hear from your perspective as a producer. The Manny Pacquiao, okay? I'm married to a woman of Filipino descent. I can tell you, when Manny would have his title fights, it was the biggest thing in the world for her family, Monica's family. And Manny Pacquiao in 2011 did a duet with Dan, a cover of Sometimes When We Touch that you produced. Can you tell me the Manny Pacquiao Sometimes When We Touch story?
Sure. Well, it was the first time I'd ever produced somebody who got beat to death for a living, and also beat people to death for a living. Manny is the sweetest, most lovable guy who happens to be just a killer fighter. and I think he'll wind up becoming the prime minister. I really do. I think he's such a hero to his people.
I think it's a president.
Yes, or is it prime minister or president?
See, I think it's a president. I only remember Duterte, who I think was arrested subsequently. He had the National Guard or whatever they're called in the Philippines shooting people for using drugs. This was happening.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, boy.
but I think it's president.
Yeah, could be. My story with Manny is pretty interesting. We were recording. I think it had to be around 2010 in Nashville. Matt, Danny, and I had sort of a reunion album we did. It was lovely to do, and the album was called Intimate eventually, and we had a ball making that record. And part of the time, we would just be yakking away and laughing at my house in Toronto, which is where my studio is for overdubs. And I remember Danny showed me on YouTube, I guess it was from the Jimmy Kimmel show, and it was Manny, this wonderful prize fighter from the Philippines, being asked what he likes to do as a hobby, and he says he likes to sing karaoke. And obviously it was set up, and Jimmy just said, well, what do you like to sing? What's your favorite song? And he goes, Sometimes When We Touch. And it turns out the Filipino culture love ballads, especially these kinds of ballads. And so Jimmy Kimmel said, well, why don't you go stand over near where the band is and sing it for us? And the band already had the song ready to go. And Manny sang the song. This prize-fighting guy sang the most tender ballad. And he was so passionate about it visually. We didn't laugh at it. We were just really stunned by it. And I looked at Dan and Matt and I said, boy, do I see a great opportunity here. Like, really great opportunity. And he said, and Matt and Dan both said, what are you talking about? I said, we've got to get in touch with this guy, have him do a duet with the original guy who did Sometimes When We Touch, meaning you, and we'll produce it. And it might be a smash hit in the Philippines and who knows where. And we got a hold of his manager. And the next thing you know, we're flying to New York to meet at the St. Regis Hotel. And, they had booked the top floor, and we're all there just laughing, getting to know Manny. And a month later, we're at Capitol Studios in L.A., and we're recording Sometimes When We Touch with Manny and Dan. And it was really quite a lovely experience. And very hard to put that vocal together for Manny because it's English as a second language. So it was very, very hard to get him to pronounce certain words and whatever. But, I worked very hard on that. And it did come out. And I don't think many of his fight fans cared about him singing a ballad like that. But certainly the Filipino culture loved it. Yeah.
I could imagine the Philippines would eat that up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
it was.
cool.
We don't really have any idea of how it did, but I have a feeling that everyone knew that version.
So hearing that little story there, which is wild, that's from 2011. That duet, which features Dan Hill, of course. But it makes me think of, okay, so I've become friends with Snow. Snow had a big hit with Informer. You might have heard it a few dozen times. Okay. And basically, he doesn't record new material anymore. But, if you want to do if you want to make a fiddle version, because I'm working on this with Ashley McIsaac, I have this vision. But if you want to do a fiddle version of Informer, like he'll go on that. And Informer did become a hit again in 2019 because Daddy Yankee made a reggaeton version of it, and it became a massive hit again. And I was just thinking, Dan could just, you could just keep producing Dan, remaking Sometimes When We Touch with different people. Just a thought.
I think it would be a good reggae song.
You know what? Actually, I could put this together. I think I'm talking to the right guy, okay? Because Paul Faber, do you know the name Paul Farberman by any chance?
Sure.
Okay.
I love Paul. Yeah.
So Paul is working with Snow right now and all these things, and I think there should be a Sometimes When We Touch, like reggae version with Snow and Dan Hill.
Love the idea.
I can put that together. Look, I'm gonna connect you and make that happen. I'm being serious right now.
I like the idea.
Okay, good. Sometimes people play along with me on the podcast, and
No. I think it's a great. I think that'd be really fun.
Amazing. Okay, and I realize now people definitely need to buy Unplugged: Stories and Secrets from a Life of Making Records, Scoring Film, and Working with the Legends of Music. because I realize now all the places I want to hit, I'm going to probably chat you up for 4 or 5 hours here. So I'm going to cut to a couple of notes I took, and then I have a whole different area I want to talk to you about. But
Okay.
earlier today, I was chatting with Paul Myers, who also a dear friend of Blair Packham, by the way, but he brother of Mike Myers, and Paul and I are chatting because for 6 months I've had Paul on the calendar to visit the basement to talk about John Candy, and now he's telling me his schedule is so crazy he can't actually get here. Anyways, that's a whole separate, I gotta work that out with Paul. But I understand you, maybe this is during the homemade theater years, but you knew Mike Myers before Wayne's World was a thing. Am I right about this?
It wasn't the homemade theater years.
Okay.
It was when I was back in Toronto. I had moved to LA from 78 to 81, and so did my brother, which effectively ended homemade theater. And then I moved back to Toronto because my wife and I wanted to have kids and didn't want to have them in LA, and I wanted to try to, and I missed, frankly, Toronto. So we moved back in 81, and I was doing a lot of different kinds of work to try to, make ends meet. Found myself all of a sudden doing TV and film score and being very successful at it. And in 1987, which is probably one of my favorite years of my life, I was so busy on so many fronts, scoring Friday the 13th, the TV series, scoring My Secret Identity, scoring a TV series out of LA called The New Gidget. And I was also a co-host with Ted Wallachin on a show called It's Only Rock and Roll. And this was 87. It was a CBC show at night. And we loved doing it. It was so much fun. And about halfway through the series, John Brunton, the producer, said, hey, we've got to get some other people to be a part of the comedy skits. And he said, so we're looking at people at Second City to see if anyone, floats our boat. And one of the people that we looked at, because Ted and I were involved, was a guy named Mike Myers from Scarborough, who probably was about 19 or 20, I bet. And we just loved him. He was so full of energy. He was so funny. He was just literally, we knew he'd be a star. And at the same time, we also knew that he would just, probably eclipse us, no problem. But the bottom line was we wanted some really talented people on the show. And along with a few others, we got Mike to do the second half of the series. And during that series, Mike came up with the character of Wayne. And part of what I would do is I'd be the sort of straight man to Wayne in these different comedy segments of this variety show we did with rock and roll. And I just loved him, and we had a lot of fun. So, those little bits exist, and they're really fun to watch. But he did, he created Wayne, and then he brought it to Saturday Night Live. And I guess what happens is when you bring things to Saturday Night Live, characters or ideas to Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels owns everything. So basically, the movie Wayne's World, Mike owned nothing. Lorne Michaels and Paramount owned everything. And when I saw Mike years later, he was doing the I'm blanking out the other series.
Austin Powers.
Austin Powers, yeah. And he was, I met him at the Four Seasons Bar in LA, and he was doing Austin Powers' second movie, and we embraced, and he said, oh my God, your show bought my first furniture for me, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, and he told me about the whole thing with Wayne's World, and he said, yeah, but on Austin Powers, Fred, I own 70% of everything.
Wow.
And I was like, that's beautiful,
So you got to have that, you got to live and learn, right? You got to, I need to own my shit if I'm going to make real money.
We all have lessons. Sometimes we have hard ones.
So when you produce a show, I know you co-produced with Matt McCauley. Like when you co-produce a song like Sometimes When We Touch, because you didn't write the song, if somebody covers it, you don't actually see money from that?
No. We only see money from our version that we produced.
Right. Okay, well, I'm going to ask you in a moment about a song you actually co-wrote, so I know you'll see money from that. But first, a couple of notes is Ted Wallachin's been down here. Love talking to Ted. So hello to Ted, I suppose. And it's interesting to hear you say John Brunton's name. Well, he's producing so much TV in this country. But I just had humble Howard Glassman over here last week, and he was talking about working with Ed the Sock at City TV, and that he was telling the story of how John Brunton saw him working with Deanie Petty. And that's how we got the hosting gig with Ed the Sock for Ed's Night Party. So just love hearing these names, I guess, is what I'm saying here.
It's I think Toronto really had. I know it's so different now, but we really did have such an incredibly interesting community for so many years. That was such a brotherhood and sisterhood, really.
Yeah, and I guess I'm here to collect all these different stories, so we can connect these dots here.
Very much so. That's great.
But one story, though, that minor conflict, I'm wondering if you could speak to this. And I heard you tell the story about Mike Myers kind of inventing the Wayne Campbell character. And another gentleman who's been on this show sort of takes credit for the TV debut of that character, Christopher Ward. So Christopher Ward had a show, he had City Limits on City TV, sort of a precursor to Much Music. But he says a young Mike Myers would come by and created the character of Wayne Campbell on his show. So I feel like we have a coinciding Wayne Campbell.
I'm gonna say that's very possible that wasn't on our radar. I'm just saying for sure that let's put it this way, as far as a national CBC show, Mike Myers came on with Wayne for the first time ever with our show.
Love it, and of course, famously, because he's on the record saying this, Mike Myers never envisioned a Garth character. Like, this was something that I guess Lorne Michaels and at SNL kind of forced upon him, and then it became Wayne and Garth. But the vision from Mike Myers was no Garth, I suppose. And
there was no Garth-like guy on our show.
Maybe that was you.
No, I mean, but boy, oh boy, I mean, I really played the straight man to Mike.
Right.
It was funny because I remember because generally I'm not a straight man, so it was pretty funny to be one.
That's like when Leslie Nielsen became. Okay. I saw the new Naked Gun, and then I have an 11-year-old.
Me too.
And yeah, so I saw that, and then I was like, I have memories. Again, I'm a bit younger than you, but I remember about 14 years old. I'm in the theater to see the Naked Gun. I honestly haven't laughed that much in a theater since. This is the honest to God truth. Like side-hurting belly laughs. I'm not even a belly laugh guy at the movie theaters, but I found that whole movie, The Naked Gun, so ridiculously funny. And I should just point out, I hadn't yet seen Airplane. I should just put that out. I saw that later. But I watched the original Naked Gun with my 11-year-old just this past weekend. And he also had belly laughs, I just want to say.
I think the new one. I mean, I was sitting there watching it with my fiance, and she liked it, but I was howling.
Just so funny. Rob Bruce, again, one quick thing. He wants me to ask you about Bobby Ogden, the piano player on the song Sometimes When We Touch. He says he played for years with some guy named Elvis Presley.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had, when we did Sometimes When We Touch, as well as other cuts on the Longer Fuse album back in 1977, we were using a lot of Nashville players who would come to come to Toronto, right, and would record with us. So we used half Canadian players and half from Nashville. And Larry London on drums would come up, and Bobby Ogden, the keyboard player on Sometimes When We Touch, was also there. And so we would fly both of them up, and they were just incredible to work with. And Bobby Ogden, who I still see around Nashville, he's still okay. He's sort of retired, but was brilliant. And Bobby is the one who came up with the piano intro on Sometimes When We Touch, literally in the first run through, and then the next run through was the take, and that was Bobby's brilliance to come up with that piano intro.
I'd love you to tell me a little bit about One Chance. This is I know you co-wrote it and you co-produced it for Stan Meisner. And of course, it was covered by Eddie Money. So do you receive any Eddie Money for that version of One Chance?
Well, One Chance was Stan's solo, quote-unquote, Canadian hit. But he didn't do a lot to help promote it because he didn't play live. So I think we missed our shot to make it a bigger hit. But actually, it's one of my proudest productions of that time, and I did co-write it with Stan. It's one of my favorite songs we wrote, and I love Stan. He's still one of my closest pals. And we did we had made a deal with Almo Irving, which is A&M Records publishing company. So they got the publishing, we got the writer's share, and then Eddie Money did cover it on an album that went double platinum in the U.S., but I don't think I ever got the right money. for the Eddie Money recording, because I think that should have taken care of my advance and stuff. I don't think it ever did.
What a shady business you're in there. I feel like I hear this story all the time.
I think that the great part about my years of where I didn't make records for quite a while, and I just did TV and film score nonstop, those were very profitable years because you get money from airplay, and that money is not collected by, let's say, record labels collect on record sales. ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC, and then in Canada, SOCAN, they collect all the airplay royalties, and all the it's very accurate. It's very true royalty payments and statements. So it was wonderful to have to deal with that for 15 years, as opposed to try to deal with a record label when you have a hit and you know you're not getting the proper payment, because they make a living out of sort of screwing people. You know, that's just their deal. But the nice part about the airplay royalty on ASCAP and SOCAN and BMI is that, you know, it was all very transparent.
No, great. That's great perspective there. Absolutely. So I do want to talk about TV and film composing, but there's a name I'm going to throw at you. Well, two names I'm going to throw at you on our way there. One is Jimmy Webb. What? Tell me about working with Jimmy Webb. I know you produced 10 Easy Pieces.
I did. I've produced 5 albums for Jimmy over the years. I've worked with him since I was 23. I've been his record producer, his musical arranger, and musical director ever since. He is, you know, my longest running client and part of my family. He is America's greatest songwriter, in my opinion. I mean, probably along with Paul Simon and maybe Joni Mitchell and, you know, a few others who wrote lyrics and music together. And Jimmy is probably the least known of those because he didn't really make a living as a solo performer. Even though he made a lot of solo records, they didn't sell. But early on, actually, sometimes when We Touch was a hit, I had already been a huge fan of Jimmy's first couple of solo albums. And actually, no, he'd done maybe 4 solo albums. And they were all commercial failures, but they were brilliant artistically. And I loved his voice. It was raw and unique. And I loved his writing. I thought his writing was absolutely frighteningly brilliant. And I remember being with Matt. We were at the offices of Harvey Cooper at 20th Century Fox Records, which is where Dan Hill was distributed in the U.S. with. And we had just had the hit with Sometimes When We Touch. And I remember sitting in Harvey Cooper's office, and it was a great Hollywood moment. And he looked at us and he goes, "Listen, whoever you want to produce next, I'm going to get them for you." And I'm like, oh, wow, you know. And he goes, "So who do you want?" And I could have said James Taylor, you know, Elton John, Jackson Brown. I said Jimmy Webb. And he said, "Why?" In a very, very unhappy why. And I said, because he's the greatest songwriter I've ever heard, and he's got a great voice, and he's never been produced properly, and I know Matt and I could kill a record with him. And he said, okay. And so he literally did the old, you know, "Hey, Betty, get Jimmy Webb's manager on the phone." And all of a sudden he's speaking to Willie Williams, who's Jimmy's manager. And the next day we're in the office meeting with Willie, and Willie likes us. And the next day we went to Jimmy's house and we hung out and got high and laughed. And he just said, "You guys have to produce me."
Wow. That's a great, I'm so glad I asked about Jimmy there.
Yeah. And then it turned into the first album I produced called Angel Heart, which was recorded in 78 and 79 and came out in 1980.
Who produced Santa Jaws?
Santa Jaws was produced by me and Andy Hermant, who was the owner of Manta Sound.
Just trying to correct all these public records here. Okay. You didn't know. You'd be grilled. Like, ask the guys from Sloan. It's hot and sweaty on this show. Okay. Fun fact, I produced a show for a prolific film producer named Avi Federgreen. And the show is called Unleashed. And I don't get to have although I do get to ask a question or two on the show now that I think about it. But he's interviewing people. He just had Megan Follows on the show. And Of course, everybody wants to talk about Anna Green Gables and everything. But all I can remember is 10-year-old Mike excitedly tuning into CBC because Megan Follows was going to play a goaltender playing against, men. And this movie, which I erroneously thought was called She Shoots, She Scores, which makes no sense because she's playing a goalie, so she's not scoring. Right. Makes no sense. But that's how I remembered it. And of course, this movie was called Hockey Night. And then just for fun, I'm bouncing around. Who's in it? Oh my God, it's a pre-Murdoch Mysteries, Yannick Besson and Megan Follows. And then I see music by some guy named Fred Mollin. Do you remember doing anything for Hockey Night, the CBC?
Oh, of course. No, I wrote the music for it. But I mean, that was really during that time when I moved back to LA. Moved back from LA to Toronto. And my wife and I had made that journey back. And I thought I would be super busy in Canada because I had had such good years in LA, coming off of Sometimes When We Touch. And I got to Toronto in 81 and literally it was crickets. There was nobody looking for me to work. I had one project to do and then it was really, really rough, And so I fell into a few things where people called me and said, hey, would you want to try doing a music score for a little TV movie? And I had no experience doing that. And but I just said yes to everything. So a Hockey Night, after a while, I was working with people who liked what I did when I was trying to earn while I learned. And they liked me enough. And so I think Hockey Night was one of the first maybe it was like number 4, number 5 of my first TV movies I ever scored. And I remember, I didn't have a sampling, big sequencing keyboard to start working on. I had to use different synthesizers and live instruments, and it was a bit of a challenge. And I probably would really want to refund their money if I saw it again. But I did write a good song for it. I really felt good about the song I wrote.
Okay, what's the name of that song?
It's called Making a Stand, and I brought in a girl named Taffy McElroy from Memphis to sing it. And I thought that was the best part of the movie, that song.
Okay, so we're now transitioning into some film and television composition stuff because I'm going to play. I have a couple of things loaded up. I'm aching to play with you, but one, I want to play a bit of this.
This is better than my imagination. This is more than a dream come true. Without the slightest bit of hesitation, I knew what I was meant to do.
Freddie Baby, My Secret Identity. I watched this show. This show tricked me into thinking Jerry O'Connell was Canadian.
Right.
Only I just assumed so because it seemed like it was a Canadian production. I just assumed he was Canadian. I'd seen him in what's the Steven Stand By Me. I'd seen him in Stand By Me, but that was it. But please, you wrote that song?
I did. I wrote and produced that theme song and also scored 44 episodes of the series.
Okay, so I'm just in the timeline of things. So, because you talked about Friday the 13th, not the movie, the series, but that's in 87, Friday the 13th. So so now as we talk about like Hockey Night and My Secret Identity, is this all work before you kind of break into American productions?
No, I think 87 is when I broke into American productions with the Friday the 13th, the TV series.
Right.
Which was Paramount and just being shot in Canada. Right. And then I did The New Gidget for Columbia. And then I also did My Secret Identity, which was a Universal show. But again, all these were using Canada, to make some savings and also to get some Canadian content. They would get tax incentives, etc. So I was Canadian, and so I got a lot of those gigs. But 87, I was doing all those series. And I don't know who it was, but man, I was busy and I did good work.
No, I'd say you did good work here. Now's a chance for me to ask you about another FOTM who comes up quite a bit on this program. So I'm just going to play a song, then you'll tell me what it's from and who it is and all that important stuff here. One more.
It's never easy to leave the past behind. The only answer gets harder to find. The passion burns. The pages turn, break the silence and tear the darkness away. Break the silence, let the nights lead the way.
Fred, whose beautiful voice am I hearing here?
That's Molly Johnson.
Molly Johnson. Wow, Break the Silence. What series is this from?
That's from one of my favorite TV series I've ever done. It was Forever Night, and it was in the 90s, and it ran 3 seasons, and then was in reruns for a long time, about a vampire cop, a guy who wanted to try to get his life back in this new life as a vampire cop in Toronto, played by Geraint Wyn Davies, wonderful guy and great actor. And they would need, during each episode, songs for the vampire bar. And it was called The Raven, the bar. And so Stan Meisner, my dear buddy and songwriting partner, he and I would write these songs that felt sort of dark and creepy and weird. And they would use those as the soundtrack for the vampire bar. And that was one of them that we did, Break the Silence. You know, a lot of those, because I was so busy scoring 3 TV series at once, that I would just write the lyrics and I would tell Stan, okay, you put the music to this and you produce that version. So really Stan was the producer on all of those songs, but I was the co-writer with Stan on those.
So what was it like? Did you work closely with Molly Johnson, or were you there when she recorded this?
I wasn't there, no. I mean, I've met Molly. She and her sister, Tabora, would come on our It's Only Rock and Roll show in '87. So I had met them back then.
What a talented family.
Yeah, it's a great, super talented family. And but I was not around for the recording of any of the Raven songs. We used Laurie Yates as well a lot of times. And Stan did a great job of creating these really cool, very dark, sort of moody musical backgrounds.
Really cool. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you how you got the gig working on some guy named Aaron Spelling's show, Beverly Hills 90210.
Well, here's the deal. Nepotism does exist.
Oh, just ask Tori, right?
Yeah, and I'm not averse to nepotism. I mean, my brother became, from being an actor, early on, he became a writer and producer of television. He was eventually hired on numerous great shows, including 90210. And during one of the later seasons of 90210, he was put in a position where he could hire a new composer, and that was me. And so I had no problem saying, yep, my brother got me the gig. But of course, you know, I got the gig, but I had to prove myself to everyone involved at Spelling. And by the way, it was always Mr. Spelling if you ever talked about him, you know. Okay. And I never met him. But, you know, I had to go through a lot of baptism of fire once Larry got me the gig. But I did a full season of 90210, and it was the season that Tori loses her virginity. So I did that episode.
Of course, to David Silver.
Yeah, to David. And so so that's the only one of the whole season where I did get notes from Mr. Spelling before I wrote the piece, and he said, please make this romantic. And please let me hear it when it's done.
Interesting.
You know, so that was a pretty heavy one to have to write, but I think I did a good job on that. Yeah,
Absolutely. What an epic moment in that series here.
yeah.
By the way, how many Geminis have you won?
I think I've only won one, and I'm not even sure I won one. I think it was
Well, you
Beyond
won
Reality.
one. You won
I
one
did?
for best original music score for a series.
Okay, so it was for
Beyond Reality. Yeah, 91.
Yeah, boy, I don't even remember winning it. I remember being nominated a couple times, but I'll have to go see. I have an area of my kitchen where there's SOCAN awards and some other awards, and I'll have to see if that's there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you, where's your Gemini? But it sounds like you're not even sure you won it, so it doesn't sound like you.
I don't remember winning it. Isn't that funny? I just don't remember winning it.
Oh, that's because you've been in America too long. I feel like.
No, I think it was because it was in '91. I was literally scoring like 3 TV series at once, producing a record. I mean, I don't know I don't know who that guy was.
I hear you. No, I hear you. You're prolific. And there's a whole chapter I'm going to get to in just a moment here, and I'm going to shout out some names, but I just want to throw out one more show I'd see. I feel like in the days before internet, like you'd kind of come home from school, I'm speaking for myself here, and you'd throw on something. So you inevitably would watch Hard Copy at some point. Like Hard Copy was just on. Like, I can't believe I did that, but I definitely saw many an episode of Hard Copy. And what did you do for Paramount's Hard Copy?
That was in the '90s, and it was because I had done so much work in TV and film, including work for Paramount, that the person who was now in charge of Paramount's TV music happened to be one of the sort of people who was a part of a team during the years I did the New Gidget for Columbia. So we had a friendship, and he said, "Listen, we're calling a few composers to write 100 different music cues that we'll use as a library for Hard Copy." Now, by the way, this was a fantastic gig because, if they used 5 minutes of your music every episode, by the end of the year, you made $100,000 in royalties.
Wow. So
And all you did was these initial library music things, and then they used them at their discretion. So I was never a part of placing the music, but I did do this 100-song library for Hard Copy.
That's, smart. You're a smart guy. You figured out, how to make a great living at all this. I'm now thinking of a story long time ago. Robert Altman, who's sadly no longer with us, of course, but Robert Altman was talking about how his son made more money from the MASH movie than he did because his son wrote the lyrics to "Suicide is Painless." And yeah, like this. So it was really eye-opening for me, who's not in the business at all. Like, it's this guy, he directs the damn thing. It's spun off into he obviously didn't own it, but he spun off into one of the most popular series of all time. But his son got a credit for writing the music, which of course played on every episode of MASH, the TV series. So his son made bank for that.
We call that a lottery win. I mean, that is so fantastic. The story behind that is great because in the movie MASH, which was a wonderful movie Altman directed,
Right.
There's that one scene where one of the characters plays this little song on guitar, "Suicide is Painless."
Right.
And it's really only a verse and a little bit of a chorus. And when it came down to making the TV series, they just loved the idea of that melody being the theme. And so it became the theme. Now, if Altman's son wrote the lyrics, it's still the copyright was Johnny Mandel, who wrote the music, and Altman's son as the writers. So even though they didn't sing the lyrics in the actual TV series, Altman, yes, and Mandel and Fox Publishing would have received all the airplay royalties. So, by the way, I know for a fact that Mandel, because he was managed by one of my managers for years, he made on the average $1.5 million every year from his side of that theme.
Oh my God. Wow. Okay, this now
It played all over the world, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, and still does.
No, absolutely. Now I just dropped this. I was talking to Paula Cole like last week, and Paula Cole wrote the song that became the theme song to Dawson's Creek. But that's not what happened with our Toronto band Bare Naked Ladies when Tyler Stewart was convinced to come home from the cottage to record something because there was a new show that, hey, we could be the theme song for, and that was Big Bang Theory. So it's
Right.
just
Oh boy.
wow, bottom. I think that paid for the cottage. Okay, so
Yeah.
and more.
Yeah.
So okay, here's what we're gonna do. You've been amazing. How is this going for you so far? You enjoying your Toronto Mike debut here?
I'm loving it. I mean, ever since Santa Jaws, I've never stopped smiling.
Well, I threatened in this not so secret WhatsApp group. I threatened to do 45 minutes on Santa Jaws and 45 minutes on Sometimes When We Touch. But
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
going to ask you about some just anecdotes about some big names. But here's big name to me, okay? But I know you worked with Frank Stallone quite a bit. How does that come to be that you're working with Frank Stallone, and how is it working with Frank Stallone?
Well, interestingly enough, again, in the early part of my moving back to Toronto, 81,
Yeah.
I started to do a couple of little music for TV films, short little film shorts or whatever, really learning while I earned. And Sid Cap, Sid Cap and Nick Stiliadis had a small company. And when they decided to do their own first feature film, it had to be around 1984, 1985. And I was still by no means yet a seasoned TV and film composer. I really was just learning and struggling at times, but doing okay at times. And I was able to somehow be considered as the music supervisor for this film they were doing called, I think it was called Pink Chiquitas. And Pink Chiquitas starred Frank Stallone as a private eye, I think. And of course, this is Sylvester Stallone's brother. He'd had some success with one song, but otherwise was living in the shadow of his brother. But he was very, very lovely and very funny. I mean, Frank is like a stand-up comedian. So I just, got this gig. And the next thing you know, I'm working with Frank on this movie, producing a couple songs for him in the movie. And then he said to me one day, he said, I want to do a big band album. And he said, I want to use Sammy Nestico on arrangements. And I knew Sammy Nestico as being probably the world's greatest living big band arranger and legendary. And I was so thrilled. And Frank said, so you'll produce it with me. And so we did this record, which was financed by Frank and his family. And we did it, I think, again, probably 1985, I think. And we used a 65-piece big band and orchestra, which Sammy Nestico arranged, and then he came in and conducted. And Frank happens to be one of the greatest big band type singers that you've ever heard. I mean, he can channel Sinatra, he can channel Bobby Darin, and man, oh man, the record I did with him, which has been called different records over the years, Day In, Day Out, or I think it's called In Love in Vain. It's a masterful album, the most beautiful arrangements. Frank sings his butt off, and I mean, I don't know how much producing there really was, because I mean, it was so beautifully arranged and well recorded by my engineer. But I'm very proud of that record. Thank you for asking about that.
Day In, Day Out is how I see it listed on Discogs.
Yeah,
for what it's worth there.
yeah.
Okay, Frank Stallone. Wow. Okay, I need to ask you about this duet productions. Okay, so you sort of have a reputation for bringing like iconic artists together for duets. Can you tell me what I'm talking about, and then maybe we can just name check some of these bigger names than Frank Stallone, believe it or not?
Yes, bigger. Yep, for sure. Over the years, because I've produced a lot of records, it started to become a bit of a thing where, we'd get to a certain part of the album and the artist and I would be talking, and maybe I'd suggest it, or maybe the artist would suggest, this song would be a good duet. Maybe we could get, and sometimes we'd be guessing or wishing for something, or sometimes the artist might known somebody, or I might have known somebody. So, wouldn't it be great to have a duet with, so let's say, Michael McDonald. And it turned out that I've known Michael forever, and we're very, very close friends and have been for years and years and years. So calling Michael's not a problem. And so, maybe one of the first duets I did was with Michael. And then, there's a big long list in the book that talks about the people I've worked with. And believe me, it's a stunning list, and I can't believe I've had the chance to produce them.
Well, I teased monster names. I'll just throw a few at the listenership. But Willie
Yeah.
Nelson,
Yeah.
Billy Joel, speaking of Carly Simon, Vince Gill, Glenn Campbell, Crosby and Nash, Art Garfunkel, Jackson Brown, Linda Ronstadt. These are big freaking names. And then if we want to get a little more modern, you was it Billy Ray Cyrus and Miley Cyrus?
Yeah, we had Miley do a duet on a song called Ready, Set, Don't Go that I was producing for Billy Ray. And actually, at first, we weren't going to ask her because she wasn't even really singing back then. She was on the Hannah Montana TV show, but really was not much of a singer. And it just turned out that the record label, which was Walt Disney Records, really believed that it would be a hit if we had her on it. And by no means, I didn't disagree. I thought it was a great idea. And so Miley's on there singing along with her dad.
Well, my 21-year-old daughter attended the Church of Miley back in those Hannah Montana days, so that was a big deal.
That was a lot of fun. That's I was running Disney's A&R out of Burbank with my first and only real job for a year, and that year was the big Hannah Montana and High School Musical year.
Look, they were staples in my home, that's for sure. One name I'm going to ask you about here, and then we're going to change. Well, I'm going to ask you about two names because it's my show. What are you going to do? Leave this Zoom? Come on, you can't do that. Chris Cornell. I freaking loved Chris Cornell. Like, what did you do with Chris Cornell of Soundgarden and Audioslave fame?
Well, I produced an album, I think around 2011, for Rita Wilson, Tom Hanks' wife, and a great actress and singer herself. But I produced her first album, where I really had to sort of mentor her in how to sing at the mic, etc., because she really hadn't done it before. But we made this beautiful record called AM/FM, and it was all songs that we covered from the years of AM radio as well as the years of FM radio. And there were a lot of guest duets on that record. Their particular Rolodex went very deep. Mine was pretty good, but Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson's Rolodex was really good. And we did a version of All I Have to Do Is Dream by the Everly Brothers, which is one of my favorite songs. And we did a gorgeous version of it. And we were thinking about who could do the harmony and some solo lines as a duet overdub. And it turned out that because she's got sort of Greek genetics, she had become friendly with another Greek who was married to Chris Cornell, and they were great pals. And so she called this gal who's married to Chris and said, would Chris consider doing a duet with me? And apparently he said, no problem. When do I do it? He was one of my favorite singers. I mean, the guy was monstrous, died terribly, unfortunately, and terribly young. But I do have some lovely memories of hanging with him and doing that vocal. And it's a beautiful record, and he sings just in a whole different way, in a beautiful way. And I'm sorry he's gone. Terrible loss.
Well, listeners of this program know I'm a big 90s alt-rock guy, and for my money, there was no better singer in that scene than Chris Cornell.
No, I agree. Yeah.
And can you name, here's a pop quiz for you, can you name the movie where Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson met?
The movie they met.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
I phrased that awkwardly. I realized in my head.
I know. I did know this, but I'm not remembering now. I'd be guessing.
Sure.
Was it Sleepless in Seattle? No,
it's before that. It was Volunteers. Do you remember the movie?
No, I wouldn't remember that.
Tom Hanks, yeah. And you mentioned the Greek heritage of Rita Wilson. Of course, she was a producer of some sort on My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which was a Toronto phenomena as well.
Yes, and she also was one of the producers and makes a fortune off of Mamma Mia.
And you want to hear the mind blow of the day? That Rob Pruce, who sent in that question earlier that we talked about, Rob Pruce currently working on the Broadway touring version of Mamma Mia, the musical.
Wow.
So it's all connected.
Well, Rita is one of the producers.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell Rob because Rob's here tomorrow morning, coincidentally, for Toast with Bob Willett, Rob Pruce. I will tell him to get Rita Wilson on Toronto Mic'd. How does that sound?
I hope you do. Yeah.
One last name here, and then one more song, and then this whole different wild world that we haven't even referenced yet. What did you do with Shania Twain, Canadian's global superstar?
I did nothing except we had to threaten to sue.
Okay, tell me this story, because I understood you wrote a song for her.
I'm not sure I can, actually. I don't think I can. I think
That's
we're
the
actually
good stuff.
Yeah, I think she had before she was Shania and she was Eileen Twain, she had a career in Ontario and also sang at the Deerhurst Inn for years. And she had a bunch of tracks recorded by a different producer way back when. And one of the songs she cut was a Stan Meisner, Fred Mollin song. And I can't go any further than saying that no one knew that she had done it. And unfortunately, there were reasons for our concern.
Well, I'll just say one word, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, it had nothing to do with her. I mean, she had signed away everything probably at that point. And so whoever was involved with that record is who we really were trying to get at, so to speak.
And you can always stick in your bio now that you wrote a song recorded by Shania Twain.
I do. I think I do.
Well, I read it somewhere. All right. So a last musical note here before we change to a different genre, a different, style. Jesus Take the Wheel. I was reading last week, somebody who co-wrote the song passed away.
Yes. Gordy Sampson, who is my dear friend from Nova Scotia, who I basically moved to Nashville so he could have success. Once I moved him here, within a year, I had negotiated a publishing deal for him, which I got a small piece of. And one of the first songs he wrote that was a smash was Jesus Take the Wheel, which was awfully lovely to have. And it was co-written by Hillary Lindsey and Brett James. And it was Carrie Underwood's biggest hit, and it was monumentally successful. Brett James, who was the co-writer with Gordy, just recently died in a small plane crash.
That's right. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. Terrible.
But that's that sadness aside, this was a lucrative song for you.
It was a lucrative song for everyone involved. I mean, I just had a small piece, but I was so proud of Gordy and so proud that he, had such great success, and he has continued to.
Okay. In 2 minutes or less, I'm going to just tell the listeners, I know you're in Nashville, so you probably won't make a trip to the GTA to attend TMLX 21. It's November 29th at Palma's Kitchen. It's at noon. I'm going to do a live recording. Fred, let's get you up here. How about it? You and Gary Chowan can come by.
I would love that. I would love it.
November 29th. Palma Pasta will feed you, and Great Lakes Brewery will make sure you have some fresh craft beers. So it's going to be fab.
I like everything you're saying.
Everyone's invited, especially Fred and Gary. Okay. Blue Sky Agency just decided they want to do 2 more months of sponsorship of this program to keep these conversations going. So much love to Doug Mills. You can write Doug now. Doug at blueskyagency.ca. He's eager to chat with you and any Toronto Mike listeners looking for dynamic and creative work environments. I can tell you, my wife was ordered to get back in the office 4 days a week. This is literally a new thing where she works, and I think it's happening across this continent. So if you need to configure your office space and reimagine it, Doug's your guy. Have a convo. Doug at blueskyagency.ca. Ridley Funeral Home. They have a great podcast called Life's Undertaking. Brad Jones and I, and we record new episodes every 2 weeks. So subscribe and enjoy Life's Undertaking from Ridley Funeral Home. And last but not least, recyclemyelectronics.ca. That's where you go, Fred, if you have old electronics, old devices. Well, you can't. I think you have to be in Canada. But everyone else, okay? Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, put in your postal code, and find out where you can drop things off to be properly recycled so those chemicals don't end up in our landfill. May I play one more song, Fred?
Of course. Yeah.
Don't fall asleep on me, okay? Very soothing. We'll move this to the background here. I am getting a little bit relaxed over here, Fred. My goodness gracious. We haven't talked at all about this, but when I'm doing my homework, I realize you have a whole career, which I don't even know how to describe it, except it's like children's instrumental favorites. How would you describe this part of your career, and how did this come to be?
I think I think my career is so goofy because it's predicated on me getting phone calls and me just saying yes to anything. So I just basically always took stuff on because I figured a gig is a gig is a gig, and I probably needed to make a living. So in the middle of, again, a very busy time in my TV and film score years, I think it was 1998, I got the phone call from Jay Landers, who was then at Walt Disney Records, and he said, we want to do an instrumental lullaby album using Disney songs and do them in a very meditative, very calming manner of instrumental music that would put the child to sleep. And he said, do you want to do it? And of course I said yes. So I had never done one before, so I had to sort of decide how to do it. And I brought in a few people that I trusted, and I played some keyboards on it myself. And then we used a real orchestra, and we did this very calming, beautiful record. And it was called Disney's Lullaby Album. And it was, again, music to put the small child to sleep. And it became a tremendous success. And to this day, I can't believe, but it begat 6 other instrumental lullaby albums for Disney. I've done a ton of other work for Disney. I ran Disney's A&R in LA for a year. And so I had a tremendously great run thanks to Walt Disney Records. But the lullaby music is really something I'm beyond proud of. It actually makes wonderful money for me, which is fabulous. And on top of it, it does a good thing. It puts little kids to sleep nicely. And I'll give you a quick anecdote. I didn't realize, first of all, I didn't realize how many, we're talking over 250 million streams of this music. Not to mention the album has gone platinum, etc. And then the others have done extremely well as well. So I was looking for a new car about 6 months ago in Nashville. And there was about a 30-year-old gal who was my salesperson. And we're looking at cars, and halfway through when she's showing me cars, she looked at me and she said, "Are you the Fred Mollin who did these instrumental music lullaby albums?" And I said, "Yeah." And she almost started to cry. And she said, "I fell asleep to your music ever since I was a baby. And I still listen to your records." And I was so moved. Then of course I said, "Can I get a better deal now?" and I think I did, actually. No, but I was so moved that I've run into people like this for years and years. I get fan letters all the time, and I'm very, very proud of that music. And I have to say, out of all the things I've done as an artist, because I am the artist on these records, I've never had a more successful run.
Goodness, great. Yeah. I was on YouTube, just what is the most popular of all, because they're all so heavily streamed, but the one I played, You'll Be in My Heart, that was the most popular one in terms of number of streams.
Really?
Yeah, unless it was just the keyword I looked up. Maybe there is others.
Oh man, that's just. It doesn't surprise me, but it also does surprise me. So.
Well, it's beautiful. And again, you mentioned you did other work of Disney owns Pixar, but Disney owns everything. If you're in doubt who owns something, Disney probably owns it, but they own Pixar. And I know you did like a Ratatouille album. What's Cooking? It's called. You did a Finding Nemo album, of course, Lightning McQueen's Fast Tracks. Like, these are big deals for a certain demographic. So good on you, man. I'm glad I got to meet you. And I, again, urge the listenership to pick up Unplugged, Stories and Secrets from a Life of Making Records, Scoring Film, and Working with the Legends of Music. Is there any story you were itching to tell that I just didn't prompt for? Is there anything you want to...
Well, you know what? I mean, of course there are, but I'm going to tell you, first of all, thank you so much, because I'm, the book is very, very much takes place in Canada, because so much of my career is in Canada. But I can tell you that if people want the book, you can get it on all the normal situations, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc., Indigo. But I do want to mention that if you want an autographed and inscribed copy, you go to fredmollinunplugged.com, and then the publisher sends me a book that I will then personally autograph and inscribe. But I can tell you that it is a very Canadian story on many levels. It's really, again, a story about my life in music and the wonderful and unique people I've worked with and cool projects. But I can tell you this was a blast to talk to you about. I mean, you had me from Santa Jaws on, you know.
Love Santa Jaws. Again, I was too young at the time, but loving it now. I forgot to ask you, how many Junos have you won?
I think I've won 3. I think I won 2 for Sometimes When We Touch, and then Longer Fuse, the album. And then we had a kids album for A&M called The Rugrats, not to be confused with the cartoon Rugrats that stole our name.
Did you lawyer up on that one?
We did, and the problem was that our lawyer, who had originally started with us, had not trademarked our name. So we didn't really have the kind of clout we needed, and
should have used Paul Farberman. What were you thinking?
Oh man, that was a long time ago. You know, I would love to have used Paul, but yeah, we sort of we lost out on that because we know for a fact that they actually called their show the Rugrats because they had seen and heard the A&M records that we had done. So that was my 3rd Juno. I've been nominated for a bunch, but I think as producer, those 3.
Wow, were you at the recording of Tears Are Not Enough by any chance in 1985?
I was not. No, I was in Toronto, but you know, at that point, I mean, I didn't really know. I mean, I knew David Foster quite well.
Well, Dan was part of it. Dan
yes,
Hill.
but it was David Foster who was doing all the reaching out.
Yeah, and Bruce Allen. It was those guys in Vancouver.
And I knew both of them, but no one would have reached out to me as a behind the scenes person because David's the producer. So, you know, but I certainly got a kick out of it.
Well, I got a kick out of this, man. This was awesome. So thank you, and I owe Gary Chowan another lasagna for this because he had the first episode of the quarter, which I loved. The last episode of the quarter, I loved. Thank you, Fred, for doing this.
Well, this was a treat, and I just want to say how much I appreciate you.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,771st show. Go to torontomike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. Become a member at patreon.com/torontomike. I have decided to actually do stuff in there, like I'm posting behind the scenes thoughts and different tips and who's upcoming and taking questions and comments. So if you dig Toronto Mike and you dig Toronto Mike, or you dig both, become a patron at patreon.com/torontomike. Go do it now. Okay, welcome back. You know the craft beer of choice around here is Great Lakes Brewery. We love GLB. They'll be providing fresh craft beer for TMLX21 on November 29th. That's a Saturday at noon at Palma's Kitchen. Palma Pasta will feed everybody. Go to the 2nd floor of Palma's Kitchen in Mississauga. We'll be recording live. I'll have the beer there. You get a free meal from the hot table. It's going to be amazing. Sadly, I need to say goodbye for the season to Toronto's Waterfront BIA. I have loved the last 4 months talking up what's happening on our waterfront. I hope Toronto's Waterfront BIA returns next summer. If you'd like this spot, please write me, Mike at torontomike.com. There's room for a partner. Recyclemyelectronics.ca. Blue Sky Agency, Doug Mills. Again, 2 more months. He's a good guy. Write him now, Doug at blueskyagency.ca. And Ridley Funeral Home. See you all tomorrow morning. Toast with Rob Pruce and Bob Willett. Be there.